north woods stretch across the horizon like a living shroud, a vast wilderness where the trees stand as silent sentinels over secrets older than the bones of the earth. For me, Jason Carver, this forest is more than a place. It's a wound that has festered in my heart for 20 years, ever since my sister Ellie vanished into its depths. On Monday, May 19, 2025, at 2:10 p.m. +07, I sit at the edge of that same forest, my hands trembling as I prepare to return to the place that stole her from me. It was the summer of 2005 when Ellie disappeared, a moment that shattered my world at the tender age of 12. She was my everything, my protector, my guide, the fiery spirit who filled the void left by parents I can scarcely recall. Her absence didn't just break me. It carved a new path through my life, one haunted by guilt, unanswered questions, and a relentless need for closure. Ellie was a force of nature, a whirlwind of energy wrapped in a cascade of red hair that seemed to catch fire in the sunlight. Her laugh was a melody that could pierce through the gloomiest of days, a sound that remains etched in my memory like a sacred hymn. We grew up in Blackwood, a small town nestled at the edge of the North Woods, a place where the line between civilization and the wild blurred into a hazy frontier. Our parents died when I was too young to remember their faces, leaving Ellie and me to navigate the world as a pair of orphans bound by necessity and love. At 17, she was practically an adult in my young eyes, a beacon of courage I could never hope to match. I idolized her, following her on every adventure she dreamed up, my shorter legs and timid heart struggling to keep pace as she led me through the countryside and forests surrounding our home. She'd point out hidden trails, her voice brimming with excitement as she spoke of forgotten valleys and secret ravines, her imagination painting the world in colors I could only dream of seeing. That summer of 2005, Ellie's obsession with the North Woods grew into something almost feverish. She'd heard whispers of remote corners of the forest, places the locals avoided with a quiet dread, their voices dropping to hushed tones whenever the subject arose. At 17, she was a wildfire, her eyes alight with the promise of discovery, her spirit untamed by the warnings that hung heavy in the air. She proposed a weekend camping trip, her voice buzzing with anticipation as she described the uncharted territories she wanted to explore. I begged her to reconsider, a knot of unease tightening in my chest at the thought of venturing so far from the safety of Blackwood. The North Woods felt alive in a way that made my skin crawl, its shadows too deep, its silences too profound. But Ellie's resolve was a steel I couldn't bend. Once her mind was set, no amount of pleading could sway her. I followed her, as I always did, my heart heavy with a premonition I couldn't name. We hiked for hours, the forest closing in around us like the jaws of some ancient beast. The air grew thick with the scent of pine and earth, the sunlight filtering through the canopy in thin, golden shafts that seemed to flicker with unease. Ellie moved with purpose, her steps sure and steady, while I stumbled behind, my pack digging into my shoulders. The trees parted suddenly, revealing a breathtaking valley that stretched out before us like a forgotten Eden. Its sweeping views extended for miles, the forested hills rolling into the distance, their peaks shrouded in a faint mist that gave the landscape an ethereal quality. Ellie declared at our campsite, her voice ringing with triumph as she dropped her pack and surveyed the land. "This is it, Jason," she said, her eyes sparkling. "This is where we'll make our memories." I wanted to believe her, to share in her joy, but the stillness of the valley felt oppressive, as if the very earth were holding its breath. I helped her pitch the tent, my hands fumbling with the stakes as she gathered firewood, her movements graceful even in their practicality. That evening, we sat by the campfire, the flames casting dancing shadows across her face as she regaled me with her favorite ghost stories. She loved to scare me, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper as she spun tales of spectral figures wandering the woods, their hollow eyes searching for the living. I shivered despite the warmth, my imagination conjuring shapes in the darkness beyond the firelight, but Ellie's laughter pulled me back. "Don't worry, little brother," she said, ruffling my hair. "I'll protect you, always." I believed her, clinging to her promise like a lifeline as the forest loomed around us, its presence a living wall that separated us from the world. The stars above were the only witnesses to our laughter, their cold light a stark contrast to the warmth of the fire. In that moment, Ellie looked freer than I'd ever seen her, the wildness of the woods mirroring the wildness in her heart. I drifted to sleep in my sleeping bag, her presence beside me a comforting anchor. The last sound I heard her soft humming as she kept watch over me. When I awoke just before sunrise, the world was cloaked in a gray mist that clung to the valley like a shroud, its tendrils curling around the tent like ghostly fingers. Ellie was gone. Her sleeping bag lay cold and empty, the fabric still creased from her form but devoid of her warmth. Panic seized me, my heart pounding as I called her name, my voice cracking into the silence. Ellie, Ellie, where are you? I shouted, stumbling out of the tent into the damp morning air. I told myself she'd wandered off to explore, a habit of hers I'd grown accustomed to over the years, but the stillness that answered back was suffocating. The mist seemed to swallow my cries, leaving me alone in a world that felt too vast, too empty. An awful dread settled into my bones as I searched the campsite, my shouts growing hoarse as I combed the nearby woods. I checked every tree, every bush, my hands trembling as I pushed through the underbrush, but there was no sign of her. No footprints, no broken branches, nothing to suggest where she'd gone. It was as if the earth had opened up and swallowed her whole, leaving me behind to bear the weight of her absence. Guilt crashed over me like a tidal wave, its icy grip tightening around my heart. How had I let this happen? I knew we shouldn't have come, knew the North Woods held dangers I couldn't name, and now my failure to protect her gnawed at my insides. I abandoned our gear, leaving the tent and our supplies scattered across the clearing as I ran back to Blackwood, my young legs burning with the effort. The trail seemed to stretch endlessly, the forest closing in around me, its branches clawing at my arms as if trying to hold me back. By the time I reached town, my voice was raw, my body trembling with exhaustion and fear. I burst into the sheriff's office, tears streaming down my face as I gasped out what had happened. "She's gone," I sobbed. "Ellie's gone." The weeks that followed were a blur of despair, a waking nightmare that refused to end. The police launched an extensive search, combing the valley and surrounding forest with a determination that gave me fleeting hope. Search parties fanned out across the North Woods, their voices echoing through the trees as they called Ellie's name. Dogs sniffed at the ground, their handlers following closely, while helicopters buzzed overhead, their blades slicing through the air. I stayed with them as long as I could, my small frame dwarfed by the adults who moved with grim purpose. But they sent me back to town after the first day, my presence more hindrance than help. They found nothing, no footprints, no scraps of clothing, no sign of struggle. The longer the search stretched without leads, the more their hope dwindled, their official stance shifting to the grim likelihood that Ellie was gone forever. "She might have gotten lost," one officer suggested, his voice heavy with pity. "Or maybe an animal." He didn't finish the sentence, but the implication hung in the air like a storm cloud. I refused to accept it. In my heart, I clung to the belief that Ellie was out there, relying on me to find her. I'd sit on the edge of my bed each night, staring out the window toward the North Woods, whispering promises into the darkness. "I'll find you, Ellie," I'd say, my voice trembling with determination. "I'll bring you home." But the town moved on, the mystery of Ellie's disappearance fading into local lore, a cautionary tale told to children to keep them from wandering too far. For me, the wound never healed. The guilt of that day consumed me, a darkness that settled into my soul, a constant companion through the years. I'd failed her, and that failure became the lens through which I saw the world, a world dimmed by her absence. 2 decades later, the nightmares began, creeping into my sleep with a ferocity that left me shaken. They started on the eve of the 20th anniversary of Ellie's disappearance, as if the milestone had unlocked some buried part of my psyche. In my dreams, I saw Ellie lost in the shadows, her red hair a beacon in the black forest, her voice crying out for me to find her. "Jason, help me!" she'd scream, her words echoing through the trees as I ran toward her, my legs heavy as if mired in mud. The forest in my dreams was a labyrinth of darkness, its branches twisting into grotesque shapes that clawed at me as I passed. I'd wake at dawn, trembling and drenched in cold sweat, the images searing into my waking hours. Her face haunted me, her green eyes wide with fear, her screams a chorus that followed me into the daylight. These weren't mere dreams. They felt like a summons, a call to return to the North Woods and confront the demon that had haunted me since childhood. My wife, Maggie, watched me with growing concern. Her gentle attempts to draw me out met with my silence. We'd met a few years after Ellie's disappearance, when I was in my early 20s, a broken young man trying to piece together a life from the shards of my past. Maggie was patient and kind, her warmth a balm to my wounded soul, but she knew the shadow of Ellie loomed large over our marriage. She tried to coax me into talking about it, her voice soft as she asked about my sister, but I'd shut down, the pain too raw to share. One morning, after another restless night, I sat at the kitchen table, staring into my coffee as if it held the answers I sought. Maggie sat across from me, her eyes searching my face. "The nightmares again?" she asked, her voice trembling with worry. I nodded, unable to meet her gaze, the weight of my sleepless nights pressing down on me. She reached across the table, her hand resting on mine. "You're going back there, aren't you?" Her words were a statement, not a question, her intuition cutting through my silence. I sighed, the weight of my decision pressing down like a physical force. "I have to, Mags. The dreams mean something. I can feel it." Maggie shook her head, her plea laced with love and fear. "It's been 20 years, Jason. I know you miss her, but I think you need to let this go. Ellie wouldn't want you torturing yourself like this." Her words struck a chord, stirring the guilt that had never truly left me, but the visions were a fire I couldn't extinguish. "I'm sorry, but I have to know what happened to her. If there are answers out there, I have to try, for both our sakes," she argued, her voice rising with desperation, but my resolve was unyielding. In the end, she extracted a promise for caution, though we both knew my determination would override it where Ellie was concerned. The next morning, I packed my truck, each item a reminder of that fateful trip. My sleeping bag, rolled tightly and secured with straps, brought back the memory of waking to find Ellie gone, the cold emptiness of her absence seeping into my bones. The satellite phone and GPS tracker Maggie insisted I bring felt like lifelines to a world I was leaving behind, their sleek modernity a stark contrast to the primal wilderness I was about to enter. As I tossed in the last of my gear, a chill ran down my spine, the memory of that morning in 2005 flashing through my mind. I could almost feel the mist on my skin, hear the silence that had swallowed my cries for Ellie. Had she felt the same dread, realizing something was horribly wrong, that she was suddenly alone in a forest that seemed to pulse with malice? Maggie stood on the porch as I loaded the truck, her arms crossed tightly over her chest, her worry a palpable force. "You've got your satellite phone and the GPS tracker, right?" Her tone was maternal, grounding me despite the storm within. I managed a faint smile, though it felt hollow. "All packed. I'll turn the tracker on when I park and call you every evening when I set up camp. I promise." Her nod was reluctant, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. She stepped down from the porch and wrapped me in a fierce embrace, her warmth a stark contrast to the cold dread in my heart. "Please be safe, Jason. Come home soon." I clung to her, wishing I could stay, but the pull of the North Woods was inescapable. With a final goodbye, I pulled myself away, climbed into the truck, and set off, the forest looming in the distance like a dark promise. The drive took hours, the remote landscape unfolding beyond Blackwood's outskirts like a tapestry of green and shadow. I'd returned to the North Woods only a handful of times over the years, each visit a pilgrimage of pain and failure that left me hollow. The road narrowed as I turned onto the gravel access path, the crunch of tires on stone a sound that transported me back in time. The forest seemed untouched, its borders immune to the passage of years, its trees standing as they had 2 decades ago, their branches whispering secrets I couldn't decipher. Memories flooded back, Ellie leading me through these trails, her red hair a beacon in the dim light, her hand gripping mine when my fears surfaced. "Don't be scared, Jason," she'd say, her voice steady. "I'll never let anything happen to you." Her promise echoed in my mind as I drove, a bitter reminder of my failure to keep her safe. I reached the clearing that had been our trailhead, a small patch of open ground surrounded by towering pines. The late summer air was still and heavy, the scent of pine and earth thick in my nostrils. Stepping out of the truck, I felt the weight of the forest settle over me, its presence a living thing that pressed against my skin. I slung my pack over my shoulder, the straps digging into my flesh, and checked my compass, following the northern bearing Ellie had insisted on all those years ago. She'd been convinced there were undiscovered valleys, hidden ravines waiting to be explored, and now I needed to see them too, to walk the path she'd taken and uncover the truth of what had happened. The hike was grueling, the weight of my supplies testing my aging body. I wasn't the spry 12-year-old I'd been, my muscles aching with each step, my breath coming in ragged gasps. The trail wound through dense woodland, the trees closing in around me, their branches forming a canopy that filtered the sunlight into a dim, greenish haze. Doubt crept in, whispering in the back of my mind. Could I really endure this alone? I stopped frequently to drink water and catch my breath, my hands trembling as I wiped sweat from my brow. But turning back wasn't an option. Finding answers was my sole purpose, the only thing that kept me moving forward. By noon, I reached a ridge overlooking the valley, our valley. It lay below, untouched by time, its forested hills rolling into the distance, their peaks shrouded in a faint mist that gave the landscape an otherworldly quality. My heart pounded as I descended, the trail steep and treacherous, loose stones skittering under my boots. The clearing was overgrown now, the grass and underbrush reclaiming the space where our tent had once stood. Dropping my pack, I turned slowly, taking in the scene, the memories vivid and sharp. I could see Ellie joking by the fire, her laughter echoing through the valley, her voice on the wind as she spun her ghost stories. This beautiful place, once a sanctuary, was now tainted by her loss, my failure a shadow that darkened its serenity. I forced myself to focus, kneeling in the dirt as I began to search the area methodically, determined to uncover a clue, any clue that might tell me what had happened to her. On hands and knees, I combed the campsite, my fingers sifting through layers of leaves and moss, searching for any sign. Fabric, a necklace, anything Ellie might have left behind. The ground was soft, the earth yielding under my touch, but it held no secrets, no whispers of her presence. An hour passed, then two, my frustration mounting as the forest offered no answers. I expanded my search in concentric circles, moving outward from the campsite, my eyes trained on the ground for glints of metal or disturbances in the soil. I checked every tree, every bush, my hands brushing aside the underbrush as I searched for a scrap of fabric, a bead from her necklace, anything that might have survived the passage of time. But the woods remained indifferent, their silence a cruel mockery of my desperation. As dusk fell, the light fading to a bruised purple, I returned to the campsite, my body aching, my spirit dejected. I sat on a mossy log, the weight of the day's futility pressing down on me. Grief overwhelmed me, and I buried my face in my hands, sobbing as the reality of my failure sank in. I had been so sure that returning here would unveil some piece of the puzzle, some hint of what had happened to Ellie, but once again, the woods had offered nothing. Gathering kindling with trembling hands, I started a small fire, the flames a feeble comfort against the encroaching darkness. I pulled out my satellite phone and called Maggie, knowing she'd be worried. Her voice was a lifeline, her relief palpable as she answered. "Any sign of anything?" she asked tentatively, already knowing the answer. "No," I said, my voice hollow. "It's like the past 20 years never even happened here. I just feel so sure the nightmares meant something, that I'd find some answer." Maggie sighed, her sadness evident even over the phone. "I know, sweetheart, but you can't let dreams dictate your whole life. Maybe it's time to start letting go." Her words echoed in my mind, the now familiar argument running through my head. But out here, surrounded by Ellie's ghost, I couldn't let go, not yet. "I need more time," I said simply. "There are more trails and ridges to check tomorrow. I'm not ready to turn back." I could sense Maggie's worry, but she didn't argue. Her voice soft as she replied, "Okay, Jason, just remember your promise to come home safe." I assured her I would, said goodnight, and ended the call, the silence of the valley pressing in around me. Alone by the fire, I lingered, the tense emptiness a stark reminder of Ellie's absence. I couldn't bring myself to crawl inside, the thought of sleeping in that confined space too much to bear. Out here, by the flickering flames, it almost felt like Ellie was still with me, as if she just slipped away for a nighttime adventure and would soon come wandering back, her voice full of stories about what she'd discovered. I closed my eyes, letting the memories wash over me. Her laughter, her promises, the way she'd looked in the firelight, so alive, so vibrant. Sleep came fitfully, my mind playing tricks as I imagined I heard her laughter on the wind, the sound of footsteps outside my tent. I told myself it was nothing, just the forest settling into the night. But the sounds persisted, teasing the edges of my consciousness. In the early hours, a shrill cry pierced the silence, an unearthly howl that raised the hairs on my neck. I sat bolt upright, my heart pounding as the sound echoed through the trees, its pitch wavering like a human scream distorted into something more sinister. No normal animal made cries like that. They were too raw, too primal, carrying a weight of malice that chilled me to the core. The noises grew louder, closer, surrounding the campsite from several directions at once, making it impossible to pinpoint their origin. Deep snarls mingled with the shrieks, the sounds almost amused, as if whatever was making them took pleasure in my terror. I swung my flashlight beam around, the weak light revealing nothing but an empty forest, the trees standing like silent witnesses to my fear. The shrieking continued, sometimes retreating briefly only to return louder than before, a relentless assault on my senses. For hours, I sat there, paralyzed, the flashlight trembling in my hand as I listened to the cries encircling me. I felt powerless, alone in a way I'd never experienced, the vastness of the North Woods pressing in on me like a physical force. Sometime in the early morning hours, silence gradually returned, the creatures, whatever they were, tiring of their game. But I didn't sleep, too rattled to do anything but sit there, my eyes fixed on the tent entrance, the flashlight clutched like a talisman. I knew I had to get far away from this valley at first light, to a place where those chilling sounds couldn't follow. When faint rays of dawn finally crept across the tent ceiling, I gathered my gear with frantic haste, skipping breakfast in my hurry to escape. My eyes were bloodshot, my body jittery from adrenaline and lack of sleep, but I set off north, flinching at every snapped twig or rustle in the underbrush. Daylight seemed to keep the creatures at bay, the forest quiet save for the occasional bird call, but I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. It was late afternoon when I stumbled upon a decrepit cabin nestled between two towering pines, its sagging roof and weathered boards barely visible through the overgrowth. The structure looked ancient, its walls warped by time, the roof dangerously close to collapse. But it was better shelter than my tent, a refuge from whatever lurked in the woods. Inside, the air was damp and heavy, the floor covered in moss and moth-eaten furniture that crumbled at the touch. I swept away leaves and debris from one corner, unrolling my sleeping bag with a sigh of relief. As I set down my gear, my flashlight glinted off something under a moldy tarp in the opposite corner, a faded splash of color that seemed out of place in the dismal interior. Crossing the small space, I lifted the covering, my breath catching as I revealed a dusty teddy bear tucked into the debris. It was Ellie's bear, a childhood relic handed down from our parents, its fur matted with age, one beady eye missing. I recognized it immediately, my hands shaking as I picked it up, a flood of memories rushing back. Ellie had taken it everywhere, even on our camping trips, claiming it kept the nightmares away when we were in the woods. "See, Jason," she'd say, holding the bear up with a grin. "As long as Teddy's here, nothing can get us." Finding it here in this forgotten cabin, couldn't be a coincidence. Not after all these years. I clutched the bear to my chest, feeling closer to Ellie in that moment than I had since losing her. She had been here, decades ago, clearly seeking shelter in this crumbling refuge. The discovery gave me hope, a fragile thread to cling to, that I might yet find evidence of where she'd gone, what had happened to her. My excitement was short-lived, however, as a low rumble of thunder echoed through the trees outside. Within minutes, fat drops of rain drummed steadily on the warped roof boards, the sound a steady rhythm that soon intensified into a full-on downpour. Rain cascaded through cracks in the walls and ceiling, pooling on the floor in muddy puddles. So much for secure shelter. I retreated to the only relatively dry corner, clutching Ellie's bear tightly as the storm raged on. The skies unleashed torrential rain all through the night, the white noise of falling water drowning out any sounds from the forest that might have pursued me. I dozed fitfully, still holding the bear, waking now and then to the crack of thunder, the cabin groaning under the weight of the storm. Water began pooling around my feet, forcing me to retreat to the opposite corner, the highest ground in the cabin, but still the roof leaked steadily, soaking my clothes and gear. There was no escaping the rain, but at least it masked the forest's whispers, the sounds that had haunted me the night before. I passed the long, wet night talking aloud to Ellie's bear, sharing memories with it as if we were kids again. I remembered her vibrant spirit, the way she'd lead me on adventures with a fearless grin, her laughter a balm to my timid heart. I apologized yet again for not protecting her that night, my voice cracking with emotion, but finding her old toy felt like a sign I was on the right path. I would not stop until I uncovered the truth about what had happened to my sister, even if the Northwoods fought me every step of the way. Finally, around dawn, the rain tapered off, though daylight revealed several inches of standing water throughout the cabin's interior. Mosquitoes swarmed instantly in the muggy air, their buzzing a constant irritation as I gathered my soaked belongings. I tucked Ellie's bear safely into my pack, its worn fabric a comforting weight, and stepped out of the ruined cabin back into the muddy woods, rain still dripping from the leaves. Holding the teddy, I silently renewed my promise to Ellie. I wouldn't stop until I uncovered the truth of what had happened to her. The terrain grew steeper and rockier as I continued north, moving farther from the valley where she'd vanished. My socks and boots soaked through, discouragement creeping back in as I trudged onward, the miles stretching endlessly before me. Perhaps finding the bear had been a coincidence, not the breakthrough I'd hoped for. Just as I paused to rest and wring the water from my socks, I noticed strange gouges in a boulder jutting from the muddy hillside. Kneeling down, I saw they were deliberate carvings, symbols or primitive writing, their edges worn but unmistakable. Hope surged anew as I searched the area thoroughly, finding more carved stones creating a rough path through the underbrush. The markings were cryptic, their meaning lost to time, but their human origin was clear. I had discovered a trail, a breadcrumb path that might lead me to Ellie. Reinvigorated, I hurried along the carved stone path as it wound steadily downward into a ravine, the light growing dimmer as sheer rock walls closed in on both sides, leaving only a narrow opening ahead. Emerging from the ravine, I froze in awe at the towering cliff face before me. At its base gaped a massive cavern opening, partially obscured by hanging vines and roots, its perimeter carved with intricate symbols and archaic writing that matched the stones I'd followed. My heart hammered as I approached, the air growing colder with each step. There was no doubt. Ellie must have come this way too, drawn by the same mysterious path I'd uncovered. Despite every primal instinct screaming at me to turn back, I flicked on my headlamp and ducked into the yawning cavern, its blackness swallowing me in an instant. The temperature plummeted as I squeezed through narrow stone passages, the walls slick with moisture, the air heavy with the scent of damp earth and decay. It felt like descending into the heart of the mountain itself, my lamp illuminating only a few feet ahead, leaving the rest in impenetrable darkness. Finally, I emerged into a massive chamber, an underground lake shimmering at its center, its surface still as glass. Monolithic stone pillars surrounded me, their tops lost in the darkness of a ceiling I couldn't see. My headlamp's feeble glow couldn't penetrate the vast blackness stretching endlessly before me, and a shiver ran down my spine as I realized anything could be lurking, watching from the shadows. I forced down my fear and crossed to examine the intricate carvings decorating the cavern walls. They depicted twisted, inhuman creatures locked in battle with primitive peoples. Their forms contorted in agony, meaningless symbols and glyphs scrawled across every inch of stone. What had once been a sacred site now felt cold and dead, the air thick with an ancient malice that seeped into my bones. At the rear of the cavern, my light flashed across a spiral staircase cut into the rock, winding up to a stone altar on a raised dais. Two massive statues framed the altar, their carved faces contorted in frozen screams, crude bowls of rotted offerings at their feet. A prickling dread filled me as I ascended the stairs, the dark energy of the place pressing against me like a physical force. Centuries of fear and death seemed absorbed into the very bones of this chamber. I knew instantly that no benevolent being had been worshipped here. At the altar's center, carved deeply into the stone floor, was a single name, Ellie. For a moment, the breath left my lungs, my vision swimming as I traced the letters with trembling fingers. Somehow, impossibly, my sister had found her way here long ago, but the ominous carvings surrounding her engraved name offered no answers, only new, troubling questions. Had she come willingly, or had she been brought before these dark idols as an offering? I descended the stairs on shaking legs, my mind racing to make sense of Ellie's presence in this buried catacomb. Clearly, she had encountered whatever evil festered here, perhaps even before her disappearance, seeking temporary refuge within the stone walls and twisting passages. But it still didn't explain what had happened that long ago night in the woods above, how Ellie had gone from our campsite to stumbling upon this hidden crypt, or if she'd ever emerged again. Lost in thought, I almost missed the debris cluttering a narrow gap in the rock on my way out. Crouching down, I angled my lamp to reveal the rusted remains of a small camp stove and lantern, moss-eaten packets of freeze-dried food scattered around them. Someone, perhaps Ellie, had been living down here for some time, hiding from whatever hunted above. I sat back against the damp cavern wall, letting this new revelation wash over me. Too many questions still remained, but Ellie had been here in hiding at some point. I stuffed one of the food packets into my pack to show Maggie later, snapping a quick photo of Ellie's carved name as well, proof that I still walked in my sister's footsteps, even after all these years. My search felt reinvigorated with a new purpose. Answers were so close now, even if still shrouded in sinister mystery. With a last glance around the foreboding stone chamber that had been Ellie's refuge, I turned my light down the passage that would lead back to the surface. Rounding a curve, I froze. Something was shuffling toward me from the darkness ahead. I pressed against the damp rock walls, praying it would pass by, but the shuffling paused, then drew steadily closer. My skin crawled as a figure emerged into my lamplight. It had once been a man, but was now something far more twisted. It was hunched and rail-thin, barely more than walking bones, its flesh corpse-pale and hanging loosely off its skeletal frame. But it was the head that made my breath catch in terror. The face was elongated, with a massive underbite of crooked, jagged fangs, its nose practically non-existent, slitted nostrils flaring and twitching. Bulging, milky eyes reflected the light eerily as they bored into me, and around its neck, the tattered remains of a woolen cowl clung to leathery flesh, implying it may have once been human. No trace of humanity lingered in the creature's visage now, only predatory instinct and hunger. I stood paralyzed as its mouth split into a grin, sniffing eagerly, twisted claws extending from bony fingers, jagged and yellow, crusted with ancient filth. It released a hiss and crept toward me, its limbs twitching unnaturally. There would be no reasoning with this beast. It was soulless, driven by a primal need to feed. I saw the clawed swipe coming from yards away but was helpless to avoid it in the narrow tunnel, its talons slashing through my jacket with ease. I swung my pack desperately, gaining a slight break as the creature recoiled from the impact, but its patience showed no sign of breaking. It had stalked these burrows for centuries, and I was just fresh meat. I tried to edge past the creature, but it matched me step for step, blocking my escape in the tight space. Defending myself was impossible. My swings grew slower,